How's it going, everyone? It's Sam. Today we are going to look at the overall market because we do have a lot of assets pushing up, especially cryptocurrency, but even some stocks that have been beaten down really bad today are pushing up. I also am going to talk about how you can become a Bitcoin billionaire. I realize that sounds a little bit crazy, but I think as humans, we're really bad at looking at exponential growth, and I want to look at that here today. Is it possible to become a Bitcoin billionaire, or you could even do this with other cryptocurrencies as well? Now, I'm going to split the video into two different segments. One's going to be everything that's happening today. So if you're watching this within a few days of when it posted, great. And then if you want to watch this and it's weeks in the future after I post it, you can just skip through to the second part if you really want to. I would still suggest staying through, but you can watch that second part about becoming a crypto billionaire. If you don't mind hitting the like button and subscribe button, I appreciate that. There's also a link down there to moomoo. They're a partner of the channel, and they will give you up to 15 free stocks worth up to $2,000 each. So up to $30,000 when you start depositing. And of course, if you deposit more money, they will give you more free stocks. But if you deposit $100, they'll give you up to 5 free stocks. Also a link down there to BitGet in case you want to trade on margin in cryptocurrencies. You can use that link and they'll give you up to almost $4,200 in sign-up bonuses, depending on what you do. As we can see, the NASDAQ is coming up after being down about 2% at the beginning of the day. Dow's up significantly. S&P 500 is up significantly. This is after we've had some big earnings yesterday that did not go well. We had Microsoft announcing, and they're down 6%, which is really interesting because they had a double beat. They beat on earnings per share and revenue, and they were down like 7 or 8% earlier today, but they had a weak guidance moving forward. Then we have Google, which is down 6.5% today, and they had a double missed 15% on earnings per share, so that was pretty rough as well. Now, with that being said, we still have crypto moving up pretty fast today, and this is interesting on a day where the NASDAQ's down, that Bitcoin and Ethereum are moving up really quickly, a lot of other cryptos as well, with Ethereum up 13%. So why is this happening? Well, I think there are obviously a couple different reasons. First of all, this is not the biggest reason. We'll save the biggest reason for last, but this is helping everything right now. The DXY is falling down. We're at 109.8. We've seen some support around 110, so this is good to see us go down below it to 109.8. Hopefully it continues to fall down a bit. Now, of course, we don't want it to crash or anything like that, but we would like to see it fall down pretty significantly because it'll help a lot of these companies out because they won't have the same FX headwinds. They won't have a lot of these foreign transaction headwinds or foreign currency headwinds where they're making money throughout the world, but everything else outside the US is worth so much less. We might actually see that get better over the next quarter. We also have the 10-year Treasury note coming down. This is the second day, I believe, in a row that we've seen it come down, or maybe the third day. And that's really helping out the markets as well because people aren't able to get that same risk-free rate of return. Now, why is this happening? Well, people are thinking that the Fed might not raise rates by as much. Now, again, this isn't necessarily what's pushing up crypto as much right now, but this is helping, I think, overall. And this might be what's causing all the liquidations, which are pushing up the market so much. So we're still expecting a 75 basis point hike. You can see about a 93% chance of that, but there used to be a 99.2% chance just last week. And what's more important, December 14, we're pricing in more and more likely that we get a 50 basis point hike. So again, we're going to be at 3.75. 4.25 has the highest likelihood right now coming from investors, and they're expecting about a 52% chance that we only get 50 basis points. Now, I think all of this, these three things in a row, are causing a spike in crypto, which caused a lot of liquidations. So we just started to move up a little bit. We already had a bunch of investors that were hedging against us falling down. And now you can see massive short liquidations, 704 million in short liquidations, 602 million in short liquidations. This is the most that we've seen supposedly in 15 months. So a lot of shorts being wrecked, and that's causing the market to spike. It's a pretty illiquid market. A lot of people are just holding on to their crypto. They're slowly adding and just holding on, not really looking to sell out right now because anyone that's buying now, I believe, thinks that we're going to go up pretty significantly in the future. Now, if we get back a little bit higher than we are now, I could definitely see some people taking some off the table. Maybe they had just bought recently and they want to sell. They get a nice 25% gain. They think maybe we're still going to have a year-long bear market. But right now, I think a lot of people are just curious to see how far we go up in this mini bull run here, just this spike because of all these shorts getting liquidated. Now, I saw something interesting on Twitter. 5 Bitcoin and 10 Ethereum to become a billionaire. This is coming from Altcoin Daily, and I thought at first this is crazy, right? There's no way that you can become a billionaire with 5 Bitcoin and 10 Ethereum. But then I realized, hey, we are really bad at compounding growth rates as humans, right? It's way easier just to do math linearly in our head. So like if I tell you you're going to get a $5,000 raise for 10 years, you know how much you're going to get. But if I say you're going to get a 5%, you're going to get a 5% raise every single year for 10 years, and you're going to start at $50,000. That is really hard to work through in your head. You wouldn't be able to do that right away. So I thought, is it possible to become a billionaire before maybe we pass away or maybe our kids or something? Is it possible to become a billionaire from 5 Bitcoin and 10 Ethereum? Now, I'm going to assume that 5 Bitcoin is worth the same as 10 Ethereum at the end of this period. And that's just to make the numbers a little bit easier. So we're going to ask, are all 5 Bitcoin going to be worth $500 million? And I think there is a case to be made that 10 Ethereum might be worth 5 Bitcoin in the future, especially with Ethereum having proof of stake that's actually going to make it become deflationary over time. So we're just going to split this up, make the assumption that 5 Bitcoin is worth $500 million. How would we get there? Is it possible, or is that just pie in the sky? Is it crazy? Now, we're going to assume in this first scenario, and we're going to run several scenarios here, making different assumptions, that by 2030, we get to $1 million Bitcoin. And I realize some people don't think that's possible. Okay, we'll go through another scenario towards the end that would start with a lower number, but we're going to assume that we go from 20,000 to 1 million. And a lot of people think that's possible. That would be about 75% ROI over the next 7 years, essentially, because we only have about 7 years before 2030. Now, it'd be a little bit lower if you consider it by the end of 2030, which would actually be more like 8 years. But we're going to say it's between a 70 and 75% ROI. We get to $1 million Bitcoin in 2030, which again would just be crazy. It would be awesome. But from there, how is this possible? How could we get to $100 million Bitcoin? Well, what if we start in 2030 with that $1 million Bitcoin and we go from 70 or 75% ROI down to 50? And then every single year, there are diminishing returns. It's about 95% the return of the year before. So we get a 47.5% rate of return, then a 45%, then a 43%, then 41%. And I realize that some years are going to go down, some years are going to go up, but we're also assuming that we're going to get a 75% rate of return for this, even though we will probably go down at certain times. The fact is we'll have bigger turns or bigger returns in the market some years than 75%, and some will be less, obviously. So we're going to continue this, and we're going to get diminishing returns, but we're going to assume that keeps on growing. Now, at some point, right, we are going to have it get down to normal levels where we would have about the same rate of return as like the S&P 500. So we're going out to 2062, which is going to be 40 years from now. In this scenario, at the end, we would still have about a 10.2% rate of return, and we would have a $1.16 billion Bitcoin. So this is really bullish. This is, I think, too bullish. This would make the market cap huge. So we're going to run a different scenario because obviously this is a little bit crazy to consider. Maybe 10 years down the line, we're still getting, or actually 20 years down the line from now, that we're still getting like a 30% rate of return. That seems a little bit too high to me. Now, in a lot of these assumptions, we're going to assume that we continue to have inflation. Maybe it's 2, 3, 4, 5%. We're going to assume that we continue to use Bitcoin more and more. We have to assume those things if we think Bitcoin's going to do well. Maybe it's a global monetary supply. Maybe that's what people use instead of the US dollar. But let's move on. So in this scenario, we're going to still assume $1 million by 2030. And then we're going to assume that maybe we don't have that same growth. Now, instead of taking off 5% every year, like diminishing returns, we're going to assume that it's 9% taken off. So after the first year, 50%, we're going to assume 45%, then 41%, basically just diminishing returns a lot faster. Now, over this time span, we're obviously going to have this affect the overall result. So by the end, we're only at 2.69% rate of return by 2062 instead of this 10.2% that we got in this other scenario. So just cutting down the rate of returns a lot faster, basically saying after 2050, you're going to have a significantly lower rate of return than something like the S&P 500. Well, by the end of this time, we'd still have $109 million Bitcoin. Now, is this possible? How would that stack up versus other assets? And then we're going to run one more scenario that's probably even more realistic than this. So by this time, if we assume there's 21 million Bitcoin in circulation, which there aren't going to be, it's probably going to be closer to 20.5 million or something by this time, because we're going to have mining continue to go on for years after this. But we're just going to assume 21 million Bitcoin just to be safe. The market cap would be $2,298 trillion. So over a quadrillion dollars, $2.3 quadrillion essentially. I believe it's quadrillion. We never talk about that yet. Right now, 2020, the real estate market cap was $326.5 trillion. Now, if this compounds at a 5% compounded annual growth rate, that would be about $2.3 quadrillion. So it would be almost the exact same market cap as Bitcoin. So probably still unrealistic that the market cap of Bitcoin would be the same market cap of real estate, but it's starting to get more realistic. When you look at other asset classes 40 years down the line, right, they might be somewhat of a similar size. Now, let's get to one scenario that's even more realistic. So instead of going from 20,000 to a million, maybe you don't think we're going to get there. Maybe you don't think we're going to get there by 2030. So let's assume we only are at $502,000 by 2030. And then we actually are going to decline faster. We're going to decline at 11% a year. So instead of 45.5% the second year, we're going to assume 44.5. And this actually makes a huge difference. By 2040, we would be down to about a 17% rate of return. But then we're going to assume that instead of continuously going down to like 2% or 1% rate of return, we're just going to assume that it stays at 5%. Maybe it's because we have high inflation. Maybe it's because there's more use case. Maybe it's just because people continue to invest in it because they have money that they need to invest somewhere. So we just assume a 5% rate of return continuously. And we're going to assume that this goes until 2086. So we're going to assume maybe 40 years down the line, maybe we're really old. Maybe they make us be able to live longer, or maybe this is just passed on to our kids. So by that time, over years and years, like was that 40 years of compounding at 5%, only 5%, right? So not a huge rate of return. That's half of what the S&P 500 returns. That'd still be $108 million Bitcoin. Now, how would this compound to something like real estate at this time? Well, the market cap would be pretty similar to the last scenario, so $2.27 quadrillion. But at this point, real estate would be about 7.4 quadrillion. So Bitcoin would be 1/3 or 1/4 the size of real estate, just because, again, it's compounding for a lot longer. And it's exponential, obviously. So at this rate, it looks like possibly we could see $100 million Bitcoin sometime this century. And if we roll this out, we could even lower the rate of return even more. But we're going to still assume that Bitcoin is relevant. We're still going to assume that people are buying Bitcoin. We're still going to assume that we're here in 100 years, right? But I just found this interesting. And I'm not saying that Bitcoin's going to hit $100 million by 2100. But I am saying that when you compound like this, it is way easier to get to high numbers. And maybe we will see a $10 million Bitcoin over the next few decades. Maybe we will see a $10 million Bitcoin before you pass away. So at this point, it might be easier to become a Bitcoin millionaire in our lifetime than we think. Now, keep in mind that inflation will also compound. So $1 million 30 years from now might only be worth $100,000 today or $50,000 today. It's hard to predict something that's happening so far in the future, because if you just change by a small percentage, it changes the overall value so much with compounding. So let me know your thoughts on this underneath the video. Do you think you can become a billionaire before you pass away with 5 Bitcoin and 10 Ethereum? I think, again, there's going to be a lot of things that happen in the meantime, and we're going to go through a lot. So maybe it's not even worth really considering too much, but it is a fun exercise to think about. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Check out the link underneath the video, again, to moomoo and to BitCat, so you can get some free stocks and get some free crypto, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.